Working Title, an Experimental Display Typeface by K.E. Jennings. The concept behind Working Title didn't start with a formal brief. It started with some trial and error and a lot of frustration. Experimental typography has a long and well-documented history, and a lot of what gets called experimental still relies on the individual designer making intuitive decisions about when and how to break form. The output is interesting, but not repeatable in any systematic way. It took some time to land on the right question, but eventually it came into focus. Could disruption be engineered rather than improvised? The answer came from thinking about typeface construction rather than the styling of it. Instead of distorting existing letter forms after the fact, the project explored what happens when you select two structurally opposed typefaces and use their collision as inspiration for building something new. The conflict is built into the process from the beginning, not applied after the fact. The early stages of the concept phase ran through multiple collision tests in Adobe Illustrator using Pathfinder Boolean operations. However, not every result was usable. Many collisions produced forms that were visually incoherent or technically broken as letter forms, and the process required developing my judgment for which results held enough legibility to function while still holding on to the tension of both sources. The shift from experiment to system came when it became clear that the collision process could be applied consistently across the full alphabet, which produced results with a recognizable visual logic. I feel that consistency is what separates Working Title from a one-off exercise. As for naming the project, Working Title was never meant to be the final name. In film and publishing, a working title is a placeholder. That's exactly how I used it in this project. At some point, it became clear that the placeholder was already the right name, because it captured something true about the work. These are letter forms designed to work. The name stopped being temporary the moment that clicked. Several questions eventually shaped the research behind this project. The first was whether experimental typography could be turned into a system without losing what makes it interesting. The second was whether two typefaces from opposing design traditions could be combined at a structural level and produce results that function as a coherent typographic system. A third question concerned more the production side. What software tools or workflows best support that kind of letterform construction? And what are the technical constraints of producing a functional font file from hand-built glyphs? This is a spread from the graphic language of Neville Brody 3. Neville Brody and David Carson were major influences for this project. The target audience for Working Title is designers working in editorial, poster, branding, and motion contexts who need display typefaces that carry visual tension rather than visual neutrality. This is not a typeface for corporate communications or extended text. The stakeholders are art directors, independent designers, and design students who are looking for something that performs at headline sizes and brings a perspective rather than just a style. The market for experimental type is not large, but it's been consistent. Foundries like Emigre, Font, and Typotech have maintained commercially successful operations built largely on experimental typefaces. The success of those foundries shows that there can be an audience for work like this. The early stages of the production process for the project began in Adobe Illustrator. Each source typeface was set at a consistent size, converted to outlines, and then positioned so that the letter forms overlapped in structurally meaningful ways. The goal was not random overlap, but deliberate structural conflict, placing stems against stems, serifs against grotesque terminals, and high contrast strokes against uniform ones. Pathfinder Boolean operations were the primary production tool in this early phase. The intersect function produces a shape from only the area where two forms overlap. which was useful for creating hybrid letterforms that carry traces of both sources. The merge and unite functions were used to combine selected areas into unified paths, which helped clean up collisions that produced too many separate components. The entire process was iterative. A single letter might go through 15 to 20 variations before producing a result worth keeping. The Illustrator phase was never about producing final artwork. Those collision results were only meant to serve as inspiration. The actual letterforms were built from scratch in Glyphs Mini, using that visual research as a guide rather than a source file to clean up or trace. Glyphs Mini is a professional grade font editor that handles the technical requirements of font production, including spacing, kerning, and the export of functional font files in standard formats. Every glyph and working title was drawn directly in that program, which meant the design decisions and the technical execution were happening in the same place and at the same time. The lowercase alphabet was built first and represents the primary body of work for this project. The process moved through the alphabet based on structural elements similar across other letters. As the typeface developed, earlier letters were revisited to keep everything consistent. And this is the W upon completion. With working title, I eventually set out to answer one question. Can disruption function as a design system rather than a series of individual choices? The answer, I believe, is yes. The collision process applied consistently across the lowercase alphabet produced a set of letter forms with a recognizable visual logic, even though each glyph was built individually through a process that was unpredictable. One important lesson learned is that experimental type design involves a lot of dead ends. Not every collision produces something worth keeping, and a lot of time went toward results that never even made it into the final set. That's just how this kind of work goes. Feedback from Shaniqua Holder, who was my advisor, honestly made this a better project. Designing just for display use rather than trying to cover both made the letter form stronger. Also, revisiting similar letter forms to differentiate them made the system more coherent. Both of those calls by her improved the work greatly. In this close-up of one type specimen poster, the typeface is doing exactly what it was designed to do. At this scale, the tension built into every letter form is impossible to miss. The collision between serif and sans serif traditions that drove the entire production process is visible in each glyph, and the full lowercase set displayed together makes the case that this is a system, not a collection of individual experiments. And in this type specimen poster, the lowercase set is shown in display context. And this is Working Title, a display typeface by K.E. Jennings. Thank you.